The moment Nadia saw the address, something shifted in her chest. It was not fear exactly. It was the feeling of standing at the edge of something she could not see the bottom of, and choosing to step forward anyway. Marcus had texted it to her that morning without an explanation. Just the street name, the number, and a single line underneath. "Come when you're ready. There's something I need you to see." She had read it 3 times at her kitchen table in Waterloo, coffee going cold in her hand, trying to figure out what it meant. Marcus never spoke like that. He was the kind of man who said exactly what he meant. No games, no dramatics, no layers hidden beneath the surface. That was one of the things she loved most about him. So whatever waited at that address, it was real. And real things, Nadia had learned, were the hardest to prepare for. She drove the 2 hours alone. The highway stretched flat and grey through November, the fields on either side already surrendered to the cold. She turned off the radio somewhere past Kitchener because the music felt wrong, too cheerful, too light for whatever she was driving toward. Instead, she let the silence fill the car, and she thought about Marcus. They had met 14 months ago at a fundraiser dinner in downtown Toronto. She had been there, representing the hospital foundation, where she worked as a donor relations coordinator. He had been there as a guest of someone she never quite identified. They ended up at the same table, and by the time the speeches were over, they had talked through dessert and the better part of a bottle of wine about everything, except why either of them was actually there. He had not told her what he did for a living. Not that night. She had assumed, from the way he carried himself, quietly, without performance, that he was probably in finance or consulting. Something that paid well, but that he found less interesting than most people assumed. She had asked him once, a few weeks into seeing each other, and he had smiled and said something vague about investments and real estate. She had not pushed. It seemed rude to push. What she knew about Marcus was this. He was patient in a way that felt deliberate, like someone who had once been impatient and had decided to change. He remembered small things, the name of her mother's cat, the fact that she could not eat cilantro, the birthday of a friend she had mentioned once in passing. He showed up when he said he would. He called when he said he would call. He was also, she had come to understand slowly, a man carrying something heavy that he had not yet found the words to put down. Nadia took the exit off the highway and followed the GPS through a small town she had never heard of. A place with a dollar store and a Tim Hortons and a gas station that looked like it had not been updated since the 90s. Then out the other side of town, down a county road, into a stretch of rural Ontario that looked like the kind of place people talked about, leaving their whole lives, and sometimes never did. She slowed when the GPS told her she had arrived. She checked the address against the text. She looked up. The house sat back from the road behind a gravel driveway, overgrown at the edges with dead weeds. It was a small bungalow, maybe 800 square feet if she was being generous. The white paint had gone gray and was peeling in long strips along the window frames. One of the gutters hung at an angle, detached at one end, pointing toward the ground like a broken arm. The front step was a concrete block, cracked down the middle. Someone had placed a coffee tin filled with gravel beside the door. To keep it from swinging open, she would later understand. There was no car in the driveway. Nadia sat in her vehicle for a long moment. She was not a woman who embarrassed easily. She had grown up in Brampton, in a 2-bedroom apartment with her mother and her 2 brothers, which meant she had seen small and she had seen worn. And she understood that neither said anything essential about the person living inside. But this house did not look lived in. It looked like something had left it a long time ago and had not yet been replaced. She got out anyway. The gravel crunched under her boots. It was cold enough that her breath made small clouds, and the wind coming off the fields had an edge to it. She walked up to the front door and knocked. Marcus opened it almost immediately, like he had been watching for her. He was wearing a flannel shirt she did not recognize, old, soft-looking, faded at the elbows. His face was careful in the way it got sometimes when he was uncertain how something would land. "You came," he said. "You asked me to." He stepped back from the door and let her in. The inside was not what she expected, which was strange because she was not sure what she had expected. There was a couch that had been good once, wide and solid. covered in a fabric that was still clean, but compressed with age. A kitchen table with two mismatched chairs. A window above the sink that looked out into the backyard, where a large maple had dropped its leaves in a circle around its own base. The floors were original hardwood, scuffed and uneven in places, but swept. There was a smell she could not name, not bad, just old. The smell of a house that had held many winters. There was a photograph on the wall near the hallway. She looked at it without meaning to. A woman, maybe 60, standing in the backyard of this same house in summer. Behind her the maple was full and green. She was laughing at something outside the frame. "My mother," Marcus said. He was watching Nadia look at it. "She lived here for 31 years. Nadia turned from the photograph. "Marcus," she said carefully, "is this where you grew up?" He nodded once. "I haven't sold it. I kept paying the property taxes after she passed. My brothers wanted to let it go, but I couldn't." He paused. "I still come out here sometimes, to think." Nadia looked around the room again. She saw it differently now. She saw the couch as a place where someone's mother had watched television in the evenings. She saw the table as a place where children had done homework and eaten cereal on Saturday mornings. She saw the window above the sink as a place where a woman had stood and watched the seasons change, year after year, for 3 decades. She sat down on the couch without being invited to. "Tell me about her," Nadia said, and something in Marcus's face came loose. He sat down across from her and he talked for over an hour. He told her about his mother, Mama Grace, who had come to Canada from Nairobi in 1987 with 2 suitcases and a name she had written down for herself. Grace, because she had wanted to start over gracefully. He told her how she had worked the night shift at a nursing home in Guelph for 11 years to put him and his brothers through school. How she used to leave dinner on the stove with a note on the lid, telling each of them how to reheat it. How she had never once asked for anything she could not give herself first. He told Nadia about the summer he was 17, and he had been embarrassed to bring friends to this house. How he had made excuses. How he had pretended, once, that he lived somewhere else, a careless lie that cost him a friendship he had never fully recovered. He had never forgotten how that felt, the shame of it. Not the shame of the house, but the shame of himself. Nadia listened. She did not look at her phone. She did not shift or check the time. She sat with her hands in her lap, and she listened the way people listen when they understand that they are being trusted with something precious and breakable. When he was done, the room was quiet for a moment. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. "Why today?" Marcus took a breath. "Because I needed to know," he said, "if you could sit in this room and still look at me the same way." She was quiet for a moment. And I needed to be honest with you about something else." She waited. He stood up, crossed to the kitchen, and came back with an envelope. Not thick, just a folded set of papers. He held it out to her. She took it. She opened it. It took her a moment to understand what she was reading. The letterhead, the numbers, the name of a holding company she had heard once in passing, in the context of a real estate development in the East End of Toronto that had been in the news. She looked at the name again. She looked at Marcus. "This is yours," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir." "Yes." She looked down at the papers again. The quarterly summary was printed in a clean, unremarkable font. There were 7 figures in the column on the right side of the page. She placed the papers on the cushion beside her. She stood up and walked to the window above the kitchen sink. She looked out at the maple in the backyard. She stood there long enough that Marcus did not know what she was going to do. "Nadia," he said. She turned around. Her face was not what he expected. It was not shock exactly, and it was not anger, though there was something in her eyes that was close to both. "How long," she said, "have you known that you were going to tell me this?" He answered honestly. "About 3 months. 3 months. Yes. And in 3 months," she said, with a careful steadiness that was somehow harder to hear than shouting would have been, "you did not find one moment to say, 'Marcus Osei is not who you think he is. Marcus Osei has been letting you believe something that is not true. I know. Do you?" He did not look away from her. "I was afraid." "Of what?" "That you would leave," he paused, "or that you would stay, and I would not know which version of you was real." The room was very quiet. The old house made the small sounds old houses make. a creak somewhere in the hallway, the faint knock of the furnace starting up below. Nadia turned back to the window. She pressed her fingers to the cold glass and then took them away. "My mother worked at checkout at a grocery store for 22 years, she said. She sent me to university on that. I used to help her sort her tips on Sunday nights, loonies and toonies in little stacks on the kitchen table." She paused. "I did not come from nothing, Marcus. I came from something. I came from a woman who showed up. That matters more to me than any number on a page." She turned from the window and picked up her coat from the arm of the couch. Marcus watched her. His face was very still. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not leaving because you have money and I am surprised, and I'm not leaving because you were afraid to tell me." She pulled on her coat. "But I am angry, and you are going to let me be angry, and then we are going to have a real conversation about what honesty looks like going forward. Not the careful kind, the actual kind." Marcus nodded. Okay, she repeated. She looked at him for a long moment. "Is there anything else?" He almost smiled. It did not quite reach his eyes yet, but it was close. "No, then take me somewhere and buy me dinner. A real dinner. And you can start by telling me your actual last name. Because I have been introducing you to people for 14 months as Marcus, and I am starting to feel like an idiot." He laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere lower than the chest. It moved through the room, and the old house seemed for a moment lighter for it. They locked up the bungalow together and walked down the gravel driveway to the cars. The afternoon had gone golden cold, and the fields on either side of the road were lit sideways by the low November sun. Nadia pulled her coat tighter and looked back at the house, once at the tilted gutter and the peeling frames and the coffee tin by the door. She thought about Mama Grace, standing at that kitchen window in summer, watching the maple put out its leaves, watching everything she had built take root and hold. There was a diner 20 minutes down the county road. Red vinyl booths and laminated menus and coffee that came in thick ceramic mugs that were warm against the palms. They slid into a booth across from each other, and Nadia wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at him. "Marcus Osi," she said, trying it out. "Osi Bonsu, technically. My father's full name. I shortened it when I moved to Toronto." "Of course you did." She shook her head, but there was something beginning to soften at the edges of her expression. "You really are the most unnecessarily complicated man." "I know, I don't mean it as a compliment. I know that too." She looked out the window at the darkening fields, then back at him. "Tell me the rest of it," she said. "All of it, the real estate, your brothers, how you built it, what you actually do at 7 in the morning when you say you're going to the office." She set her mug down. "I want to know the person, not the edited version. Not the version you thought was safe." He looked at her across the table, at this woman who had driven 2 hours alone to an address she did not know, who had sat in his mother's house and listened without flinching, who was now telling him clearly and without drama exactly what she needed. He thought about all the women before her who had known who he was, before he had chosen to tell them, about how that knowledge had shaped everything, the dinners, the conversations, the way they looked at him when they thought he wasn't watching. He thought about 14 months of Nadia not knowing, and how she had looked at him anyway. "Okay," he said. "From the beginning." The coffee came. The diner filled around them with the ordinary noise of a weeknight in a small town, the clatter of plates, a child's voice from the next booth, country music low from somewhere near the kitchen, and Marcus Osibonsu, who had spent 15 years making himself invisible behind the careful language of holding companies and measured silences, began, slowly and honestly, to be known. The snow started on the drive home, not heavy, just the first soft flurry of the season, the kind that doesn't stick but catches the headlights and makes the road feel like something out of a story. Nadia drove back to Waterloo with her phone on the passenger seat and Marcus's voice still in her ear from the hour they had spent on the phone after she left the diner, talking about nothing important. She was still angry. She wanted him to know that. She had said it again before she got in the car, and he had said "I know," and she had believed him. But she also knew, somewhere she could not quite name, that the afternoon had changed the shape of things between them. Not broken them, opened them. The way a room gets bigger when you finally turn on all the lights. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in February, Marcus drove to Waterloo and knocked on her apartment door. He was holding coffee, her order from the place on King Street, and there was something slightly off about his posture, a tension in his shoulders that she noticed immediately. She let him in. He set the coffee on the counter. He turned to face her. "I have something to ask you," he said. She crossed her arms. "Already? Nadia. I'm listening." He reached into his jacket pocket. The box was simple, dark blue, no flourish. He opened it. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. "You could have done this somewhere fancy," she said. "You could have rented out a restaurant. You could have put it in a dessert." "I know. Why didn't you?" "Because," he said, "I wanted to do it somewhere real." She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had sat in his mother's kitchen and come undone quietly, in front of her, and trusted her to stay, who had told her the truth, all of it, over a laminated menu in a diner off a county road, who had learned, maybe late, that the edited version of a person is the loneliest thing in the world to offer someone who loves you. She reached out and took the box from his hand. "Yes," she said. "Obviously." He laughed. She laughed too. Outside the window, the February sky was white and still, and somewhere on a county road east of Kitchener, a small bungalow sat quiet in the winter fields, holding everything it had always held.